Hello, I'm Danielle Yałowiecka with the BBC News. Pope Francis has denounced the fires that recently devastated large areas of the Amazon region, likening them to the greed of a new form of colonialism. Opening a 3-week synod on the Amazon at the Vatican, the Pope said the fires had been set by interests that destroy. David Willey reports from Rome.
Pope Francis had harsh words for those responsible for setting fire to vast tracts of the Amazon rainforest for economic gain. May God preserve us from the greed of new forms of colonialism, he said. Pope Francis has been accused of heresy by some Catholic traditionalists who accuse him of wanting to change church teaching on priestly celibacy in order to deal with the lack of new vocations. This Vatican meeting could turn out to be bitterly controversial. Already some traditionalists have turned up in Rome calling publicly on Pope Francis to resign.
Hong Kong police have used baton charges and tear gas to break up peaceful demonstrations by thousands of masked pro-democracy protesters. The march came as opposition legislators failed in their latest legal attempt to overturn a government ban on face coverings. From central Hong Kong, here's Robin Brandt.
Their aim was to make clear their contempt for the emergency law banning face masks. They marched in their tens of thousands, almost all of them wearing something to cover their face. Police watched as protesters moved peacefully, chanting "Hong Kong resist" as they walked through the heart of the city. But after a few hours of disruption, officers moved in to end it. Tear gas canisters were fired on the crowd from police on walkway bridges above. Video showed small groups being targeted by charging officers on the ground.
As Iraqis in Baghdad hold funerals for the latest protesters killed in clashes with the security forces, the government has issued a series of planned reforms intended to defuse the growing crisis. The Prime Minister, Adel Abdul Mahdi's cabinet has put out a decree promising land distribution and increased welfare payments for poor families. Almost 100 people have been killed in 5 days of anti-government protests, as Jeremy Bowen reports.
Shooting so many dead can only increase the anger of the mainly young people who've gone onto the streets to protest. The UN in Iraq has demanded an end to what it calls a senseless loss of life. The Prime Minister, Adel Abdul Mahdi, has so far offered little more than vague promises and an appeal for calm. He's been on TV speaking, he said, to stop the deterioration in the security situation leading to the destruction of the state. Decades of war have inflicted terrible damage on Iraq and its people.
Reports from Iran say that a young woman who won a big following on social media by drastically altering her appearance to look like a distorted version of the American film star Angelina Jolie has been arrested. The Iranian news agency Tasnim says the woman, known as Sahar Taba, has been accused of various offences, including blasphemy, encouraging immorality and insulting Iran's Islamic dress code. The agency says she was detained after a series of complaints were made. Police in Kansas City say 4 people have been killed in a shooting in a bar in the early hours of Sunday morning. 5 others are reported to have been injured. Police say that they've made no arrests. The authorities in the Indian state of Manipur have imposed a temporary ban on air guns to protect thousands of Amur falcons which migrate through the region. Local residents have been ordered not to shoot the birds, which spend several weeks in northeast India before continuing their long journey from Siberia and Africa. Thousands of birds are trapped and sold in local markets. And the British drummer and co-founder of the rock band Cream, Ginger Baker, has died. He was 80 years old. David Silito looks back at his life.
1966, and a young drummer called Ginger Baker decided he'd had enough of being in other people's bands and formed his own group, recruiting Jack Bruce and Eric Clapton.
We knew we were the 3 best musicians around.
Before Ginger, most drummers were expected to sit down, shut up and keep time. Mr. Baker wasn't having any of that. His life story was a story of bands, divorces, heroin addiction and an expensive polo habit. But he was drumming and fighting to the end. In a documentary looking back on his life, the final day of filming ended with him breaking the director's nose.
That's the latest BBC News.